So this is, it's always great to start with a disclaimer, isn't it? This is a new talk for me in the Postgres space. So I was expecting two, but there's only one, so I can look over here. As many of you know from this morning, I come from a SQL Server background. I'm more and more removed from it, but a lot of my thinking comes from those experiences. And so, one of the areas that was always so tricky was schema management and database management. So the company I worked for the longest period of time was a SaaS company. So we actually had individual databases per client, upwards of thousands of databases that we were hosting, and those would have to get updated as new application updates came out. So the process became pretty arduous, and there's a little bit of history to it, which I'll share in a minute. And that really, at some point, you have that moment of, we can't be the only ones who've had this problem. Like, surely someone has solved this. And I'm not a SQL Server evangelist, I promise. There's obviously so much going on. There are numerous tools across every database, but there was one tool within the SQL Server sphere that actually really did a neat way of doing this. It was actually by Microsoft. They did it's called a database deployment project. A really a unique approach to the schema management process. And so I came into the Postgres space wanting to find something similar, and again, it's interesting to see there are many approaches to what that looks like. And so what I really want to share in the talk, this is new for me, I'm trying to slowly figure out how to give this talk a little bit better every time I've practiced it, is, I want to at least make you aware of what some potential options are. And what I'm learning is that in the Postgres space, like many other things, because it's open source, some of them are more supported, have more community backing, and maybe are further along. And some of them were great ideas that there's actually some interesting stuff there. And if we could, maybe if there's an interest and there's value, it would be interesting to see where that heads. So this is really a kind of cursory view of some ways that you could think about managing your schemas, maybe a little bit differently, particularly around source control. And so we'll go from there. This and other presentations I've given are always up in my GitHub account. This one is not actually up there yet. I'll make sure it gets up there tonight. And again, it's just been running through stuff and trying to get scripts into a place that you could reuse them if you wanted. But you can see what's up there and go forward. So what will we talk about in the next 40 minutes or so? We'll talk about what problem we're trying to solve, why this was important to me, and I think it affects a lot of people, a lot of DBAs in particular, and developers. Database change management architectures, what are some of the options that you might have? The current tooling landscape that I found. Now, I'm learning, as with everything else, it probably is still a sliver this big. There's probably, no matter how many times I search, you come up with a new thing. Another Reddit post, a Stack Overflow question, like, oh wait, there's another one, what? So I'm sure there's more, but hopefully we'll get there. And then, hopefully, I'll be able to give a really quick elevator pitch demo of the 4 different things I'm going to talk about today, just so you can see, what they are, what some pros and cons might be. I'll be really frank to say that all of them have some kind of shortcoming right now. In my opinion, it depends on your particular scenario. All right, so just to let you know what those are, this is not a deep dive in any one of them. That's usually the kinds of talks I start with. And once I really find something like, oh, okay, I really want to latch on to this one and go deeper, I'll do other talks. But I love when I've been places and someone gives here's a problem, and there's many ways you could solve this. So I just want to kind of give you a really quick rundown of it. And usually there's that one thing I'm like, oh, I had no idea about that. I'm going to go look into that more, right? Maybe there's all these other things. That's what this talk is, and hopefully it will prove to be beneficial to you. So here's the problem that I had. So again, this goes back almost 20 years. I'll give you an idea of how old this database structure was. The company I worked for quite a long time was actually acquired in the late 90s, originally by Enron. Who's old enough to know who Enron is and why it's a bad thing? Okay, so no, honestly, in this company, that used to be my hiring thing. I'd be like, oh, and then we were acquired by Enron. And at some point in time, we were interviewing people young enough, I'd say Enron, and they just kind of stare at me. I'm like, oh, you're too young. You don't know about Enron. Oh, okay, well, that's not part of the story then. Acquired by Enron. Enron invested a lot of money in the app. When it went bankrupt, the owner of the company bought the assets out of bankruptcy and started the company again. And so a lot of the foundation of this was on SQL Server, version 7 or something in 1998 or 99. So there's a lot of the processes that the company was using were born out of that time at Enron, because he got some of the developers back, let's get the boys back together, right? They just said, well, this is a process we had. And the process was this, it kind of morphed into this over time. We'd have this great idea, and of course, any new development feature required some kind of tickets, and we'd plan it out. We'd have a planning meeting. We'd come up with the idea, here's how we're going to accomplish this task. Of course, we would put that in Jira Confluence or whatever you might have. I think they are still using Jira Confluence, last I checked. So we'd have those tickets, we'd kind of document the whole thing, and then eventually, because someone that needed to give us input was not in the meeting and they didn't use Jira because they were a different department and they didn't understand it, then we'd send emails. So now all of a sudden the conversation's already disconnected. You're like, well, shoot, now we've already lost context anyway. And then at some point, we'd be talking with the DBA, and he would start to do stuff, and someone would forget, oh, we're supposed to take these notes in the tickets, and now it's in chat. And so we'd get to the point where he would be making changes. We were using an ER tool mostly. So he'd update the ER diagram, he'd kind of generate all these scripts, and then he had this magical land he would go off to with these scripts that were written in 1998 in Houston of how to merge all of these scripts together, and he'd come out with the change script. And none of us had any clue how it was going on, and I'm like, oh man, this is bad. This is not a good way to do this. But he was usually pretty good. So then we would go ahead and okay, we have this. We would get backups of our most important clients and anomalize data and do stuff. And so we might have 15 databases. We'd this is our test suite of databases to see how these scripts work. And of course, most of them would work, but one of them wouldn't. And it was always like, hey, Tim, could you show us how you do that? Because maybe we could improve this process. But whatever, we would just kind of bang our heads against the wall, have some more chat back and forth. And eventually, somehow, we would get all of those databases, because the schema was the same, but the data inside is different, maybe the way they were using the data. So there's always that one thing, right? And it usually is the most important client. Eventually, we'd get all the scripts to run. We'd all have a good time. Life was happy. And then we'd finally get this is finally the diff. This is the thing we're going to use to apply at upgrade time. So then we'd have this thing, we'd have to schedule our deployment window and get everyone on board at 3 in the morning to make sure this all works. And then we would go ahead and apply it to 1,000 databases, right? And if we were lucky, and honestly most of the time we had done enough due diligence, it was a lot of work, but we might only end up with 5 or 10 out of close to 1,000 that okay, that one didn't upgrade, so that's what we're doing for the next 3 hours. Man, I hated this. But to us, it's we got to the end and we mostly worked, and so that seemed like it was a good thing, right? At least it kind of happened. But at some point, I just kind of said, there's got to be a better way, right? I don't know. It's 2021. So at this point, now, the new buzzword of the time is getting involved, right? We're talking about DevOps, and so I'm now in charge of the development team. And we're trying to figure out how do we get this process out of one person's hands? And how do we make it something that we can utilize among a team, right? This individual, Tim, was a great developer. He kind of became the DBA from the team in Houston. And I said, but we've grown. I have more skill. I'm teaching. We actually were choosing not to use an ORM for our migrations, which was a good choice. Anyway, but my developers knew fairly well how to get the basic things done, right? How could we bring more autonomy to what they were doing? So, I just always thought this was funny. So I started trying to teach the team, and I just throw this stuff in this slide because I love, if you go to Google and you type in DevOps and go to images, there are literally 8,000 images that look like this. I'm like, really? Who came up with that? Because, man, they should get paid. Right, the whole concept was, hey, man, we have 800, 900, 1,000 databases. There's got to be a way when it's not, we're talking schema mostly. There's got to be a way this day and age that we could effectively, do the Git-based process we were already doing for our code development on our schema, so we could collaborate on schema changes to prepare for the code changes. there has to be a way for us to more effectively do CI on this stuff. So if that's not part of your job, right, the biggest part of DevOps, which is really I meant to scroll through this. I just thought this was funny, so I threw a bunch of these in like, okay, that's DevOps. Like, really? Who put that together? Like, this would scare anybody away, right? And then you could be a really giant muscular robot, and I guess that makes you DevOps. Or this might be you, right? Okay, got a chuckle. Good. All right. So, what is DevOps really? What did I want to get to for this team? I wanted to get to a point where it wasn't dependent on one person, where when we at least knew, there might be things, so most of my developers at the time could not effectively do, hardcore store procedure kind of stuff. Maybe they didn't understand transactions. That wasn't going to be their job anyway, but hey, we have a new feature. We know that there's like 3 or 4 tables we now need to do and a couple foreign keys and, maybe a trigger, a couple things that we could collaborate on, smart folks. Wouldn't it be great if we could do that, free Tim's time up to work on the harder stuff, and had a way to integrate it into our process. We're already doing continuous deployment and integration with our code, right? So every time we commit a branch and we do our PR and it gets merged, we would deploy it to our test servers. And then we had QA doing this stuff. Like, why can't we do that? Like in database, surely at this day and age we can do that. So it really got me searching for what are the alternatives for us. Now, I don't know about you or your teams. If it's an older product, probably, maybe if you were fortunate, you use some kind of ER tool, right? So at least, which, by the way, if you were on point like 30 years ago, ER tools were, like, that was where the money was. They're still the same tools. Like, they have not been updated in 25 years. You go download these things and like Windows only, but anyway, that was surprising to me. So you might have an ER tool which probably until the last 5 or 6, 7 years didn't integrate well with source control, right? So that was like, they maybe had their own weird vault thing. So that was kind of like, okay, I can't do that, which means I definitely can't get it integrated with CI. And so what I got searching for was, I know that I'm not going to get the whole thing. I didn't have the staff at the time to worry about so much of this, but the goal here is I want to be able to code changes that we could all understand. Create table, here's some columns, modify a table, change a data type, things that my developers could get started quickly. In our case, since we weren't using an ORM for migrations, we were a .NET shop, so we did use Entity Framework for basic data models. For basic CRUD stuff. Everything else was custom done. And so we had a script that said, examine the database, spit out any new models, and then I could start coding, right? But if I had to wait for Tim, we had to have the meeting, we had to get this, then we had to find a database that he would then say was okay. It'd be like 3 weeks till we could like get our models, and then my staff could actually start to do something with it. It was really frustrating. So now they could code. In this case, in SQL Server, I'll talk about briefly, they actually had a really neat, I still think it's one of the neatest ways to do it for me personally, is it was state-based, which we're going to talk about in a second, but it just looked like, it was just SQL tables. It was always whatever the current state, so I could quickly look through, create table, there's the columns, alter, store procedure, there's the store procedure. It wasn't this like, well, I added a column, so it's a script with one line in it, right? It wasn't that. I could always see the current state. And it actually integrated with their build tool, MS Build. And it created a unique, it's actually an XML package underneath, this huge XML package. And it generates a change script from 2 databases. It's actually a really cool tool. So that was the build test, and then we deploy it. And it's very easy to integrate with CI. So my staff would create a branch. We're doing a whole feature. So if you're responsible for the feature, you can update the tables, create what you need, get your data models, commit, and then your test databases on your branch are updated. We didn't have to wait for Tim. And it was like, this is phenomenal. The last part of DevOps, right? If you're really going to dive deep, and as a database, I think it's building more and more steam in the database community. It is still a little bit of a challenge because we are, much more finite state-based, right? It really matters what the immediate state of your database is. It's not as fault tolerant, right? But then, have some kind of monitoring. And for me, what it meant is I could really just have my team focus on doing the magic, right? When Tim was involved, I shouldn't have used his real name, but you don't know who he is. I'm realizing that. I should have come up with a pseudonym, right? Anyway, Maybe that's not his real name. When Tim was involved, like, it was just so hard to get any of the magic done because we're just always fighting with, oh, you know what? We had that conversation over here. You forgot. Wait, did you remember? Why isn't this working today? Did that foreign key get dropped? Why did that foreign key get dropped? Like, okay. Or the worst case is when an index accidentally gets dropped. No one notices it because there's a billion lines in the change script and your all of 1,000 databases tank after the deployment. That's fun. So change management. So here's the state of what most where I've seen. And I don't know where you or your team fall in line, but I am sure, even in this room, there are some people that are like I have tended to be. You get involved in a project, maybe it's a small project, or maybe it's your company and it's larger, but inevitably you end up with kind of like some place where you're storing all of your scripts and you think that it's organized and it feels organized until you need to go find what you meant to do for the new feature. So this is where some people are at. Maybe you're a little bit better. You have things, you have a good folder structure somewhere. You're not necessarily doing source control for your SQL side of things, for your development SQL stuff. Or it's all just in your tooling, your framework, your language, which means that there's some kind of abstraction layer there, which is just another level of thought. Maybe this is you. Maybe you are really organized, you figured this out, but you still haven't really gotten a process to it, right? Maybe it's even in source control, but it's a very manual process for you. Kind of like Tim. He was very organized, but there still ended up being a process that was outside of what we could do and what we could help contribute to. And so what I say is, one of the big reasons is, man, what happens if Tim if Tim joins the circus, what happens with all those scripts, right? It was a couple months ago, someone said, like, I don't use the hit by a bus thing anymore. I say join the circus. I was like, oh, yeah, that's so much better, isn't it? Okay, so if Tim joins the circus, we're up a creek. Like, there was nobody, and I even had numerous times I had him sit down to tell us, demonstrate this again, and inevitably, there was some folder, some script somewhere he forgot to really mention. It's like, oh, buddy, come on, man. He was in Houston, by the way. He was remote. Question.
Asked me, like, do you plan to become a chef? Yes or no?
That's awesome. That's great. All right. So here's what I'm going to talk about for the next 25 minutes or so. This is the kind of the current general state of database change management. As I see it, doesn't mean I'm right, and I'd love to learn where you're at, okay? There is the manual state-based diff. So that is not terribly unlike what we were doing. We had, kind of our dev database, which we presumed and hoped was a good copy of our production database schema, and we would update it and keep backups, what have you. And it's easy to start, it's easy to customize, very error-prone, and as I've been saying 1,000 times already, it's not scalable. It was a one-person dependent task. Then there's just state-based. So that is actually where I ended over in the SQL Server world. Like I said, Microsoft has these database projects, very full tooling, and it was state-based. And the cool thing with that is it was integrated into their IDE. So you were actually interacting with what appeared to be a database. It literally looked like tables, stored procedures, views, functions, just like you're integrating with the database. And what it was doing is producing the SQL files under the covers, and you could examine them and see them. And then it would do this build process, which produced this really ornate XML-driven thing, and then you could just deploy it, right? You just point in a database and say, deploy that thing. And it had 180 switches, right? Don't do this. If that happens, this, and ignore white space here. And if this failure happens, it was really well thought out. And it just made it really easy to say, here's 1,000 databases. I know, we can see it, feel it, touch it. I know exactly what this table should end up looking like. I don't have to examine 5 different files. This is what the table should end up like. Absolutely fail if anything like this happens. And then we still might end up with those 5 failures, but it was way more automated when it came time for deployment. So I do like the state-based model. There's just not many tools that actually do state-based, I'm finding. And I guess there's some reason for that. And then we have migration, ORM migration, which may be what a lot of you do. You do Python, you do .NET, you do Go, you do whatever. Almost all of them have some, obviously Ruby, it's like the grandfather of migrations. All of them have some kind of migration. It's what we're used to. I'd argue it's It's very, very developer focused, obviously. It makes it really hard as a DBA or as a, someone who's maintaining the schema to really understand where we're at. You've been in this project for 2 years and you have 300 migrations. I don't know, was that foreign key supposed to be added? I don't remember. And then last is what I would say is migration, which is SQL-centric, right? So there are database companies and communities that have said, hey, there might be a better way, right? Maybe we could have more control over the SQL side of things, so we're dealing with it not in an ORM language, right? So you do Ruby. Most of them have, again, for me, it was .NET Framework at the time. I would code, I'd make my objects, I'd run a command, and it would generate its own, is it Fluent? I think they do Fluent. It's been so long since I've had to worry about it. It was a fluid language. That's what it's called, Fluent. And that is what it would then do to do the migrations. It wasn't SQL, right? It was like create object and da-da-da-da-da. But it doesn't mean I could examine it and think, okay, where does this end up? And then it's only schema. How do I add a stored procedure? Well, then you got to do raw SQL. And then it's mixed in with your, I just didn't like any of that. So let's look at what a couple of these things are and see, and please ask questions as we go if you have them. I didn't say that earlier and I meant to. So manual state-based is, what I described earlier. There is some value here. To be honest with you, there's some tools that you might not know about that they're beneficial regardless. How many people here, how many of you have gotten into a state where your production or your staging, something is not matching like you thought it was, and you had to figure out how to diff schemas, right? Like, oh shoot, a client calls you, why isn't this working? What did you do, right? And how many times that happened? You dropped a whole schema, why did you do that? And so you need to know what the tools are to do this comparison. And in Postgres, there are some different tools, but it's what I described earlier. You have, somehow you've come up with a golden standard, whatever that is, and I can't get into that, right? There's 1,000 ways we could talk about that. But then you have a copy for dev and for staging. At some point, you've decided like, all right, this is our golden thing. And so you apply changes to dev as times go, and then somehow you do this diff, and you apply it to staging, you get the script, and then at least for us, we'd back up prod, try it, it'd fail. You'd back up prod, make a tweak, try it again, fail, and eventually, you got to the script, right? And you're like, all right, I finally figured this thing out. This is what we're going to do. Like I said, this isn't much different from this, but it can be a valuable tool when you get caught. So what are a couple quick tools? I'll demonstrate one of them. Postgres Compare is now a fee-based tool. I actually started using it a couple years ago, actually right after I started using Postgres, because I had to get two schemas matched because a young developer had totally butchered staging or dev or something. Not his fault. It's just like, oh, shoot, we need to figure this out. PG Admin 4, I actually didn't know this. I guess middle or late last year, there is some schema compare in there. That was new. I didn't know it. I'll be honest, I don't use PG Admin, so I haven't tried it. I don't know to what degree it is configurable, but it might be something worth checking out. And then there's some other stuff. I found this. Most everything else is community driven. A lot of people recommend it. It's called another Postgres diff tool, APDT, something like that, or APDiff, maybe, something like that. The problem with me is you had to take, like, it's not terribly automated. You have to take backups. You have to do basically schema dumps of the two things, and then it looks at schema. I don't know. That just seemed like an extra step for me. So what I wanted to show you is, if you're not aware of it, so this is Postgres Compare. Like I said, it is now a fee-based product. I have had conversations with a gentleman who writes this. He's in England. His name is Neil. Neil used to work for Redgate. So Redgate is a big tooling company in the SQL Server world, but they are beginning to get more interested in Postgres. So what happened is Neil and one of his other friends, so PG Mustard is a sponsor here, and Michael also worked for Redgate at the time. They both left, said, we think there's something to this Postgres thing. We should create some tools for Postgres. So they've started two separate companies conquering two different parts of the problem. So honestly, it's an easy, nice tool, to be honest with you. So if you need something, I actually did not look up the pricing at this point. I think it's now a subscription thing. I just don't know. I get nothing from this. I don't, like I said, I've had a Twitter conversation with Neil. I don't know him personally. But basically, you set up environments. you could have multiple environments, multiple databases, what have you. And he did just add this. I actually didn't know that. He's working on a data compare. So someone in the previous thing, I don't know how this works, but this was new to me. I have not used this in a few months, so this is a new part of his product he's trying. So if you need to diff tables for some reason, from a data perspective, I'm sure he'd love to figure out what you're doing. So you start a schema project. So in this case, I have two databases on this Docker image. One I'm calling dev, one I'm calling staging. It's a simple weather schema with a couple tables. So exactly as I've described. We have a staging database that is not fully up to date yet. I've made some changes on dev. And so you can simply say, go ahead and compare these two things now. And he does something similar in the background. I remember asking him this. He might do something to like XML, reading through the schemas and so forth, and he's doing that kind of compare under the covers. He gets a really nice, user interface showing you what's going to change. I need to add a table. There's some triggers that need to get added and a couple indexes. So there's a couple things here that are interesting to me as a employee of Timescale. It doesn't work that well with the extension, right? So we have our specific function, so I learned that pretty quickly. So it turns out that daily forecast is a hypertable. That's how we do our partition. We call them hypertables. So creating the trigger, which is what we do as part of that, does not by itself create a hypertable. There's a bunch of other things under the covers that are changing. We're keeping track of stuff in various catalog tables and so forth, none of which is here. And so there's probably just more work I have to do to figure out other schemas. We might be able to get it to happen. But the, sorry. Nope. I'm not finding it quickly. There is some, there we go. A lot of options on what you can compare, what you can ignore. He's, I think, changing this over time, and then you can really get down to the nitty-gritty of what kind of objects. So it's fast and smooth, quite honestly. What's nice then is depending on your specific deployment, when you click deploy changes, you get the dialog that decides, hey, what are you going to do? Right? You can actually click run script and it will do it. For me, if this is a timescale database, I can't do that. So instead, I want to go ahead and save the output, and I would open that up and edit it. In this case, I would have to make a couple tweaks, which is remove the triggers and so forth, and do that through our functions. Yeah, question?
Does this connect to any version control so you can publish that?
So that's a great question. Lead into the next part. It does not yet. So I've actually, Neil came from Redgate. So Redgate's original package for SQL Server is called ReadyRoll. It's a migration-based tool. And yeah. Well,
that's one of their products.
It is one of their products. We're going to talk about the other one. But I told Neil, I was like, Neil, you need to figure out how to do the database project thing, which also integrates with version control. And apparently Michael's actually been saying the same thing to him. So who knows, someday maybe he'll go there. So it does not, you would then have to do, so this would be one of those manual things, right? I'm going to get the script out. I'm going to figure out how to track my changes in some kind of repository so at least I can see the state as it went through changes, which is at least better than nothing, right? I can see what happened rather than someone's computer somewhere. So it's an interesting tool. It helps you, maybe in a part of your process. Thought it was worth at least exploring with you briefly. Any questions on that? Anyone ever used or seen PostgresCompare? All right. It's usually by subtitle here. I guess I thought I got rid of those. All right. So state-based. So this one is interesting to me because, as I said, what I visualize, and I don't know if you're similar to this, is I see the tables, right? When you look at my schema, I can picture the SQL, create table, create function, anyway. And so for me, this was really interesting. It's kind of like an entity relationship tool, right? So you do an ER diagram. These are some very expensive tools. There's PG Modeler as a gentleman. I actually don't remember where he's at. They're good tools, right? It's really, you can do physical models. You can do, depending on the tool, you can do logical models, things like that. And the nice part is you do have a source of truth, but many of them still don't integrate well with regular version control. It might be their own packages, their own vaults, their own tooling. I think like ER Studio, if you want version control, you have to buy their product for their thing. That might not be the case anymore, but it used to be. And the thing is, they work on many databases, kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none.
They're also very expensive.
And they're very expensive, for sure, absolutely. Yeah. That's where it's like, I'm glad I have one DB. I'm like, hey, Tim, you get the license because I'm not spending $30,000. SQL Server database projects, I really do think so when I started back into Postgres 3.5 years ago, Microsoft had just hired the gentleman who maintains the Postgres.NET driver. And so knowing the team that does the database projects, I knew some people on that team. I was like, ooh, maybe they're going to figure this out. 3 years later, there's been no hint of it whatsoever. So it would be pretty cool, honestly. I think they do a pretty good job of it, honestly. And it can be helpful when there's many databases that need to be done. One example of this is I keep forgetting how to say this. It's an open source project. The gentleman who started it looks like it stopped being maintained about 2018. But he's still around. Like, people have reported issues recently, and he's actually fixed a couple issues. This is about as close as I've found to the state-based kind of idea. The only problem here is it's kind of the approach that you're working in a database, and then you're getting a model out to a YAML file, which is not ideal for sure. It's not how I would choose to run my thing. The cool part of this is, though, if it were to work really well, and there are some hitches to it, so maybe there's someone who's interested in helping him carry this along, it works kind of like that SQL, right? You can make it do one file per object, and so through time, you can actually see the thing that's changing in context of the entire object, right? So you see the whole table. If you add a column or change a data type, the diff is still the whole thing. You're seeing the thing that's changing, and what you end with is the state of this project is the end state I expect the database to end up in. And then it does something similar, where you basically say, okay, now I have the whole YAML project, update that database, and it effectively pulls down the YAML for all the projects, does a compare, and produces a script at the end, which you think can go forward with. That's kind of cool to me. I'll just show you briefly what it looks like, if I can figure this out. So I have this. I'm going to open this up in code. So with this project, what ends up happening, and again, I'm doing really high level here, and so please know that I'm focusing this very narrowly. But I have this database that has 3 tables, ends up in a YAML format, and I can try and make that bigger, right? Insert meme about like, is YAML programming? I forget about that. Anyway. Whether or not this is the best approach, this is what he chose in the project. But I can see everything that happens. It's not SQL, but it's somewhere close. I can rationalize about it, and it does about 90. Right now, he claims about 95% of database objects, does functions, does store procedures, does a bunch of stuff. He did have an issue with PG 13 or 14, but it is actually fixed in the master branch. If you pull it from Python repository, that version is not yet updated, so you should do it from source there. So then the thing here is, I have this thing committed, things are not yet up. If I were to go to the database, let me try and do this quickly. Yes, so here is, all right, I'm in that database. So I'm gonna add a table, and I'm gonna add a column. All right, so if I do both of these things, and hope I get through there, it happened. If I go back and I say, so database to YAML, I put some stuff here, and the real magic here is the multiple files. So as long as you do multiple files, it keeps every object as a separate file, which is really nice for source control, so I can at least see what's changing. So if I go ahead and do that, anyone want to guess what my Docker password is? Oh my goodness. Anyway, so if I do that, I come back, and now I have a couple new files, right? So now I have a new table, which I could update, use. It has all the columns, foreign keys, what have you. And notice that the city table got updated. And if I were to look at this from a diff perspective, I can see that I got a postcode. So it's really interesting. This is not a full-fledged product, I think there's a lot of value. What's really interesting is as I've been trying to find this, I'm actually finding a number of people that are now like popping up saying, this is a really interesting project to me. It's been like 3 or 4 comments in very recent, like month or two. Hey, 1 or 2 things aren't working. Does anyone know about this project? It's interesting. There might be some value for you seeing it. I like that idea. So once you have it, you can then simply say, let me see if I can make this happen. You want to guess what the other command is? Anybody? Anybody? Hey, YAML to DB. And did it do it? Oh, you know what? Okay. We'll see if it did or not. It may not have. I can't see if I got an error or not. That's one of the things I've recognized, and I think this is one of the issues. It's the current problem is in PG 13 and 14, we got rid of a view about extensions. We've replaced it. And so one of his queries seems to always try and reapply the extensions. So it might be a fix I could contribute back. But you can see that it knew it had to add the table, it knew it had to alter the column and so forth. So kind of interesting. And again, in source control, you would still see the entire state. It's not little bits of things, and you could see the changes over time. And obviously, you could branch and have your feature branches and what have you. And that's the other nice thing, because it's still all textual, if you have feature branches, merging usually ends up being a lot easier, right? You're seeing specific things that you're merging into space, it's not dependent on order. Anyone ever try it or use it? Yeah, I was excited when I found it. I think it's a really neat concept and a neat tool. I don't know, might try and go forward with it a little bit. All right. The third option generally is ORM migrations. We've probably all used them. I'm not going to spend any time on them because I would have to choose a language, and it would take way too long, and I'd be too frustrated. So, I get it. It's been very successful for Ruby from a developer perspective. I understand the value. It's really hard to manage. In migrations in general, I would just say, I have never preferred them because while I can be assured that if all of the steps were followed, I should get the thing at the end. I don't know what's happened on the database itself, right? There's no way for me to say, but did something change over there, right? Is there a difference that I don't understand? With something like that pyrseas, yeah, I think it's pyrseas, which is weird. I don't know. Anyway, you could do that database TM, and you can do it to a script. You can actually say output to script rather than deploy it. And you're like, oh, wait a second. It's trying to delete a column. Why is it trying to add that column back or delete that column or do whatever? Oh, someone added something to the production database. Right? So there are some interesting ways to do that, knowing that you have the state set in your YAML. So ORM, again, it works as long as things are there. The one problem with ORM stuff for me is, again, you can't really do functions, triggers, that you have to do it through raw SQL, right? It's not like it's managed in any way. We're always just talking models. So you're getting tables. You might get foreign keys. You might get primary keys, some of that stuff depending on the framework. But everything else is still manual. I still have to figure out where to add it and which script was it in. Do I do it in a separate script? How do I most effective? This is what I hate the most. When I came into Postgres back, the example I gave this morning about anonymous code blocks was because I landed in this new job. Within a week, I had to figure out how to deploy a new feature, which on deployment, I had to verify that everything had happened. I'm like, oh, this is easy. I'll write a loop, right? I'll just a little function, write a loop, whatever. I'm like, how do I write a loop in Postgres? What are you talking about? And so as part of my migration, I had an anonymous block that ran, but which script was that in? And that was 80 scripts ago. And then there's, at least in most of them, there's no concept of repeatable migrations, which I think is honestly a really important thing as a database developer. So let's talk about what that is. So SQL migrations, again, this is going to be super quick because we're almost done. So they're step-based migrations similar to ORM. The great thing is they're pure SQL, right? So I'm not in a specific language with whatever syntax that language framework developer has chosen, right? Whatever that might look like. Specific features vary by tool. So some of them do testing. You can do verification as part of the migration, like it's built in, and that's kind of cool. Some of them have repeatable, so if you have idempotent scripts, things like, you need to always make sure a specific table is updated or a specific script is run. You can do that through some of these tools, which is great, not all of them. And then the one thing I've noticed, and it's very similar to any ORM, right? Any kind of migration, the assumption is you've started the project with a migration. Yes, you can get yourself into a new migration scheme, like, oh, I was doing this some other way, but now I want to use migrations. You can do it, it just takes more effort. And both of these tools I'm gonna describe, they have basically what's called baselining, right? So you have to figure out how to get, I want to start today, the database is 2 years old, how do I get to where I am now if you haven't used any other tool? How do I know I have the full schema? Get that in a script, now I have to actually apply the baseline and make sure everything's kosher, and then I can move forward from here, right? So it is a little bit more work if you don't start with it. The two I want to briefly talk about are Sqitch, which was new for me. There's a lot I like about it. The one thing that was funny, although I've seen more Perl in the Postgres community than I thought I would ever see again in my life. 20 years ago, I was doing Perl to deploy OS 10 at Penn State, and I thought it was a dead thing. But no, Perl's alive and well. There's a lot of stuff going on in Perl. And then Flyway DB. So Flyway DB was an open project, an open source project, that has now been acquired or maintained by Redgate. And so it is now a Redgate tool. You can get a free version, but of course one of the most valuable things about migrations is in their for-fee tool, which I did not realize, and really frustrating. The nice thing, so Sqitch kind of works like Git, is how he implemented, the gentleman who started it, David Wheeler. So he has like, Sqitch add and Sqitch undo and Sqitch, so anyway, that's kind of it. He does, the really neat thing I like about it is verify is built in. So as you add a migration, there's the assumption that you're going to create a verification step, and then it can run when you do the migration. Supports many databases. This tool does not yet have what I would call repeatable migrations in it. It's kind of a bummer. Flyway DB, open source Java tool, now owned by Redgate. It is very active. They're fully behind this thing. They want to see it become a productive tool. It can support reading files from S3 for your configuration if you pay for it, some of the other stuff. The one thing I like, they have two features that are cool. One is repeatable migrations, right? So when you have the scripts that need to run on every deploy, or you have a data table, your key table, right? Your relationship table, and you need to add a new value. Well, you can just have a repeatable insert script on conflict, do nothing kind of thing. But that way, you always have that one source of truth for that core data table, as it were. And then placeholder is kind of cool. You can set up placeholder values in your SQL, curly bracket, and you can apply variables essentially in your SQL scripts. What do each one of these look like? I probably won't really get to do either of them much. So here's Sqitch. If I were to do Sqitch and I have, so here's what we're going to do. I'll open this up. Oops. Oh, I do have it up. Here's what it's just SQL, right? So this is when you init a new change, you have a deploy, a revert, and a verify. It's just the create. If you want to be able to revert, how do you get back? And if you want to verify, it just has to be SQL that will produce an error. And if it produces an error, you'll get essentially a verification step. And so if I were to deploy something new, I could say something like Sqitch, add, and I need to name this. I'll just say table 1 because I don't have anything else to. Oops, and there we go. Hello. There we go. I'll just do that. How do you get out of VM? VI, I mean. Okay. So there we go. So we now got a deploy. So I could say something like, let me just grab it from over here because that's faster. Right, so I could do that. I could then have a revert, and then I could do some kind of verify. Right, so if I have that, I can then go back to Sqitch, and I can say effectively, right, so now if I try and verify the table, it says, hey, I have undeployed changes, And so it's keeping track the way that Sqitch works, and both of them has a tracking table. Very good, 5 minutes. And so it's very Git-like, and it was very intentional. David hasn't done a lot with this project recently, but there are continual updates to it. Like there is a community around Sqitch. And so, I think there's some value in thinking about it. Really great website, very good tutorial. There's a lot of value to be had, at least in the thought process. Question?
So then, sorry, this didn't deploy the change.
It didn't, yeah. This is basically, so sorry I didn't do this. Basically 3 commands, and you can have all of them happen on deploy. So I can say deploy, and it should have updated my table. We'll just go over here because that's quick and easy. Right, so if I say Sqitch and public tables, all right, and now I have my daily forecast table. All right, so it is in there. The nice things about Sqitch is it's kind of Git-like if you're used to that process. He's put a lot of thought into dependencies. You can actually, when you start a new migration, you can have it be dependent on other migrations to ensure that they've been run first. That's kind of cool. He's thought about Git flow and some other stuff, having a work process. So it's migrations like ORMs, but with a more SQL-specific thought process to it. And then the last one, the other 2 things are he has the verify step, which I just think is great. Like he thought about that straight on, right? I'm going to deploy this. Does it meet my criteria? And if not, you can fail. And then it has the revert in it. So it's kind of like the other side of this is Flyway DB. So with Flyway, let me see if I can find quickly. So I'm inside of Flyway. Now I've already configured some of this stuff. Let me get into, there we go. So here's what Flyway looks like. And I'll just open this up in code too, because it's easier to see. Very specific, you can name it just about anything you want, but they are, V stands for a version migration. So you, V1, V2, and it will, multiple formats. You can do dot formats, it's pretty flexible. R is a repeatable migration. And then U would be undo except, like a revert, except undo is only in their paid product. I did not know that. I think that's a change, and that's a really stupid change. Sorry, that's my opinion. But it's just SQL, right? Now again, for me, the thing that I don't prefer about either of these tools is if I add a column, it's in a separate, I have to step through everything to find what the final state's supposed to be. But I should at least be able to deploy those changes and get things up to date. And the thing about Sqitch, it's nice to have that verify. It will actually determine kind of the state of where things are, what's left to be deployed, and so forth. And so all I was going to show you is this. The nice thing about something like a repeatable deployment, even if I change nothing, so I'm not even going to add that other table right now. Even if I just do this, and I need to go back, add a comma, because I'm sure that would fail. And I just say Flyway migrate. Now I have this already configured, so is it Flyway DB? I'm sorry. Oops, I'm in the wrong directory. If I say Flyway, wait, what? Hello? Okay. Even though it didn't change anything else, you can see that it did run the repeatable migration. So in theory, if I were, and I'm only using this because it's quick and easy, if I were to go back here and look in this table, there's my weather types, and you'll see that we now have our 801, 802, 803. So it's fun, I guess the end point of this, and I'll just go back to the end of the slides, is, there's no, I don't think there's one perfect answer yet. If you're willing to spend, Flyway's not horrible from a price perspective. And there's some other stuff they're trying to give with it. There's a lot there, and then you get the undo, so then you get repeatable migrations, you get undo. There's a lot you can do with that. I just am excited. I just like that pyrseas thing. I'd love to see it continue because I like the concept of having a very easy to understand state-based model of what I want to see accomplished. So as I've been looking at it, I was like, oh, maybe I'll try and maybe we'll try and contribute. I don't know. It'd be fun to fix a few things there. So, questions? Thank you for keeping up with me. Man, I am coffeeed up, so thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks. Is this on? Have you heard of a tool called DB Up?
You know, I looked at it once, like 2 years ago. I have not used it.
Okay. It's an analogous tool.
To, like, Flyway?
Again, it has slightly different kind of patterns and models to it. But again, it's another example of that.
I had looked at it.
It's a .NET-based tool,
Okay.
but it works with a variety of back-end databases.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'll have to give a look, yeah. It's very cool. Yeah, question?
So I've always been looking at the topic of what happens after you do the migration, which is regression testing and accidental performance things. So if you haven't looked at it, I can show it to you later. There's a product out there called Database Labs on Postgres AI.
Yes.
And it will, and
contribute a lot to the community. So.
and it simulates the changes, runs all the query tests, and then tells you which queries degrade, which queries don't change. So really fantastic stuff, but that's like after you do the migration.
Well, and I would say that's, for me, having kind of worked through this again, because I like the topic and I really wanted to start to see what other people are doing, because I'm helping more users. And so I want to see where the whole landscape is. That's really one of my goals, to get to a point where we have some good tutorials on how to set up kind of the whole CI process.
So the great thing about this is that you can simulate what could happen without having to make a complete copy of your production database. It does like 10 clones, runs all the queries on it, and then you decide whether you want to do the migration. So, okay.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming. And again, I'd love to learn more about what you're doing.
Thank you.